Compendium, a concise compilation of a body of knowledge. How are you guys feeling? You can go first.
I mean, it's a lot that's been going on in the city in terms of a lot of turmoil, death, but it's still a lot of positivity that you can get out of the environment. So mixed feelings.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan on this one. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about in a short amount of time. A mix of emotions, I would say, coming from everything going on, not just in the city, but nationwide as well. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
I just feel a lot right now. There's a lot going on in places all across the city, such as Baton Rouge, here in Baltimore, what just happened to law enforcement in Dallas, shootings in places like LA, Minnesota, just Houston as well. Just a lot going on right now. So I feel like we should divulge on that.
Okay. Personally, I feel that the Declaration of Independence guarantees everyone a certain degree of rights, inalienable rights, which cannot be surrendered, sold, or transferred. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I feel like everyone does not get that same level of opportunity. And feel free to have a moment of silence to pause this video for as long as you need to reflect, to think, to feel, and take your time. And this officially opens our moment of vocation. The first topic is death by citizens. For example, in 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was pulled from the Tallahatchie River in Money, Mississippi, after being beaten to the point of disfiguration and lynched. His face was completely unrecognizable as a human being. And an all-white jury found 2 defendants not guilty despite a black farmer being there as a witness to the disposal of the body. How does that make you guys feel? And what are your thoughts?
So when you look at the story of Emmett Till, that story is a very loaded, layered story. So essentially, Emmett Till was a dude, young man rather, who was visiting family down south. Only around 15 years old when he died?
14
years old when he died. Essentially what happened was, how this started was, there's a rumor, according to a woman, that Emmett Till whistled at a white woman while she was walking by when he was out. Now, whether this is true or not has never been proven. For all we know, that could have just been a lie as well. However, after that, the events that followed are just ridiculous. As Emmett Till was then, taken and beaten to death to the point that he was unrecognizable, they weren't even going to have an open casket funeral until his mother said, "No, I want the world to see what they did to my son." So, when you talk about Emmett Till, and then you, bring it, years later with, stuff that's happened to people like, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, young black men who were, still kids, high school, middle school age, that this is happening to, you look at it and you realize this stuff still goes on today. Now, here's the major questions that should really be asked. 1, why is this still going on? 2, what is the motivation to commit such heinous acts? And 3, and most importantly, what's the sense of humanity that white people or Caucasian people feel when they see a black man? Do they view us as humans like they view everyone else? There are studies that show that black kids, black men, black girls, black boys, black women are seen as older than their Caucasian counterparts. For whatever reason, a black 12-year-old boy will be viewed in the same light as a black man in some studies. So the question is, how did this come about? Are white people afraid of us? These are serious questions, so I don't know. Anyone feel free to say any opinion.
I feel like a lot of that in regards to you saying how people view different races of the same age. I feel like a lot of that kind of is due to like history. It's kind of the way African Americans have been portrayed in history ever since I would say like European colonies came into contact with them in Africa. I feel like the way they were perceptive to like the people, to Europeans back in Europe, up until like the way they were perceived during slavery time, civil rights time, even all the way now throughout like media and movies and books and all that kind of stuff. I feel like they've always been portrayed in a negative aspect, and I feel like that's added. That's probably a lot more, but that's probably just part of why they've been perceived as an older, kind of more threatening, in an older, more threatening way as opposed to their white counterparts.
No, definitely, because when you talk about in terms of colonization and sort of the history of the way in which black people are portrayed, you gotta look at some of the words that they use to describe black people when you talk about colonization, and even when you talk about present day, like back then they they viewed African cities and the African people as savages because they didn't have the same style of garb as what the European counterparts is. And then when you talk about these situations that are going on in today's society, they always love to use the word resistant. So it's always that resistance, which is sort of that act of defiance, that act of going against what you're sort of considered as a social norm. And it was sort of the same thing back then. Savage was just the word that they used for it back then. You were going against what they considered their social norm. Just like today, whatever the situation may be, as long as it's a form of resistance, you're just going against that norm.
Yeah. Even going back to I'll even try to answer my own question about the whole humanity thing. If you go back to slave times, slaves were not considered humans. They're considered basically living cargo. Mm-hmm. You go, one law that exemplifies this is the 3/5 compromise. Essentially, a slave was worth 3/5 of a human being. So if you had 5 slaves, that was worth 3 people. Okay, thinking about it like that is just crazy, because these are living human beings, and you're literally treating them like they're just resources that you can just pick from the ground. And this person dies, you can just replace it with another person like that. Not like this is a person with living, breathing soul within them.
I was thinking about this, and the best analogy to say that I could think of is a cell phone. They're replaceable. You can use them at any time. You can use them to do multiple things, get multiple resources, and at the same time, there's the business aspect. It's capital, like you said, so people nowadays do banking and things like that on their cell phone. And slaves are each, I guess, considered worth bank these days. So back then, they're at your beck and call. They have no rights. For example, you could buy a cell phone at the store, replace it. You can get insurance if you want. So that's only still under protection of what you want to use it for.
Right.
So I completely agree.
And it's just crazy because you look at people for example, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. They're very vocal when certain things happen. Like the Miami Heat, after Trayvon Martin got killed, for example, back in 2012, the Miami Heat, before the playoff games, would all wear black hoodies with the hoods up in honor of Trayvon Martin. And of course, this upset some people. But it's why should this upset you? It's when LeBron James is on the court, dunking from, 5 feet within the free throw line, shooting J's, giving assists, being the best basketball player in the world. No problem. He, verbally expresses a very touchy subject, and all of a sudden people don't want to hear him talk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, Trayvon Martin was 17, not even considered an adult male. And the gun that he was killed with was put up for auction. And in that sense, it's kind of like saying this is a prize. This is memorabilia. It's not actually history. It's not, something worth crying over. And the fact that people think like that is really scary.
It's a combination of things, I believe, especially in the judicial system, that has caused a lot of these trends to happen. You look with George Zimmerman, for example. A lot of people don't know that George Zimmerman's father is a high-ranking judge in Florida. So because his father's a high-ranking judge, you can have him like ask for favors or try to like get like leniency in like some of the charges or to like sway opinions within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens all the time. You hear all the time about people, for example, that are relatives of police officers. They do a crime, they get caught with drug possession, something of that nature. They have someone, an uncle, a mother, a father that works for the police department, and they get off. On the other hand, you have someone that doesn't have these connections, and they're charged like, you know, anyone else would be.
Yeah, it's a good point that you brought that up, because I remember reading an article was talking about like the smiling drug kingpin. I think that was the title of the article. And it was talking about the daughter of a DEA agent who got busted with cocaine, weed, PCP, and I think LSD. And it was various different sizes for each drug. But in her mugshot, she was actually like smiling. And then it was something that was just sort of swept under the rug. She was released shortly after, and then it was just sort of silenced in that regard. And then you mentioned like Dwayne Wade and what the Miami Heat did, and then LeBron James and what he did. You can also compare that to like Carmelo Anthony. I don't know if you guys have seen what Carmelo's been saying recently about black athletes sort of standing up, since they're sort of viewed as heroes or as role models in terms of athletics. They need to step forward and start dabbling into politics a bit and just sort of social activism and outreach. Carmelo Anthony had posted a picture that the two of them had taken, and he had sort of shared his condolences with the family and sort of had a moment of outreach towards Baltimore, sort of crying for the end of violence and that kind of thing that was going on. So athletes can definitely have a profound impact on sort of the world and politics and policy and everything like that.
Yeah, but I feel like in regards to you saying how LeBron James and the whole rest of the Miami Heat, how like the public would get angry when they would come in with their hoods up and stuff. I feel like that's just a testament to how like it's all good if you stay in that box of you're a basketball player and like are out there on the court, getting wins and dunking and scoring threes and all that. But as soon as you step outside that box and voice your opinion on something going on, or like make a statement like that or anything, like that's when that backlash comes, because you step outside of that box. You can say the same for music artists, like as long as you're putting on these shows and making music videos and selling records and all that stuff, like it's all good. But as soon as you make a song touching on the subject of Black Lives Matter or something similar, that's when you get that backlash. So I think, it's just a testimony to how I think the public they just want to keep these people in these boxes and sometimes forget. Like when Beyonce, I don't know if you guys saw that SNL skit when Beyonce dropped Formation, and like all the white people were freaking out because they realized like, oh, Beyonce's black. Like people forget, like these are artists and athletes and celebrities and actors and stuff, but they're black people too. These issues affect them directly.
And based on what you're saying, it's like the difference between you're okay to entertain us, but you don't have to listen to you. So yeah, I completely get it.
Something similar happened at College Park. During the Mike Brown case, something happened at College Park, during fall semester 2014, when basketball players were having protests after, the lead prosecutor of that whole case stated that it doesn't have to go to trial. Of course, there were protests at College Park's campus after that. Some of the basketball players were seen outside of the Xfinity Center with signs that read something to the effect that you cheer me when I dribble basketball, but you say nothing when my people are being killed by the police. And then, of course, there were a lot of people that were now jeering the basketball players for like stating their opinion, and it just goes to show you that like the basketball players are very justified in feeling the way that they feel, And then, of course, some of them were even saying racial slurs when they came by. So it's just like, show me, how do you really feel?
And transitioning to deaths by police, there's, for example, in 2009, Oscar Grant was 22 when he passed away because he was forcefully restrained and verbally insulted and basically shot in execution style. 22 is pretty much the age of, most of us, 22, 23, leaving college, things like that. Another one, Rodney King, assaulted in 1991. Freddie Gray, who was 25, not too far older than us, was April 2015. Interesting fact, the lawyer for Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King was named Fred Gray. This was in the 50s and 60s. So everyone back then knew Fred Gray, and it's interesting to see that everyone knows Freddie Gray. And back then we were dealing with obviously other issues with, segregation and basic civil rights, and today it's kind of interesting how the same name could have such a profound connotation these days. So what do you guys think?
Oh, police executions or?
Yeah, just
Okay, well, I'll talk about like some of the recent ones. With Alton Sterling, that's the murder that happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I just find it so crazy how people find ways to justify the cops' actions. And then I counteract it with what happened to the gorilla Arambe. All right, so let's look at Arambe's situation. Arambe, the silverback gorilla, Cincinnati Zoo. Kid falls into where Arambe lives, his habitat. Arambe now has the child. Now, what people don't understand about silverback gorillas is that they get extremely mad. And so first they can be loving, but if they keep getting agitated, like all the people that are yelling at the silverback gorilla, and they have like a child in their hand, they can literally rip that child to shreds. So, of course, the zookeepers had no other choice but to kill the gorilla because, of course, it's supposed to be human life over animal life. And then you had all these people protesting outside the zoo after the zoo killed the gorilla. Like, what were the zookeepers supposed to do? Risk the kid's life? Like, at the end of the day, it should be human life over animal life because we all, as human beings, we're from the same race, we're from the same species of the Homo sapiens. And there's a reason why us humans are the dominant species on this planet. Now, you go to Alton Sterling's murder, and you have all these people trying to justify the way they shot him. First of all, there are numerous ways that cops can shoot someone. Even if the last, thing is shooting them, there's so many things that they can do to shoot someone that doesn't involve killing them the way they did. The man was shot a minimum of 6 times, 5 to 6 times. You could have shot him in the leg. You could have shot him in the arms. If you said he had a gun, you could have shot him in the arms so he doesn't have the ability to lift his arms anymore. But no, you shot him 4 to 5 times in the chest. And even after they shot him, they were still pointing the gun at his, dead body. Like, how's he going to come up? What sense does that make? So here's my thing about it. Because you had all those people making the excuse, oh, he was armed, he had a gun out when the police tackled him. The video evidence showed that was a lie. They're like, oh, well, they said he had a gun. And so, that camera isn't clear. Then the next day, you have the store clerk show a different angle. And that video is crystal clear. There was no gun. His left arm was pinned down. His right arm was pinned down. There was no... And here's the other thing. There are other things that they could have done to just arrest him. Okay? Police have pepper spray. They have tasers. They have clubs.
Rodney King.
None of those 3 options were used. They went straight to the gun. None of those 3 options were used. You did not see them pull out a club. You did not see them pull out the pepper spray. And here's the thing about it. Police officers, with the job they have, we understand it's a difficult job. And we're not saying all police are bad, but there's a reason why people don't trust the police. The reason why people don't trust the police, and this is a very honest answer, is because whenever a police officer does something bad, the rest of the police officers don't want to say that police officer did a bad job. Mm-hmm. If you're in the medical field and a doctor does something bad, other doctors will be like, that's a bad doctor. If you are in the pharmacy field and you see a pharmacist do something bad, people look at that pharmacist and be like, that's a bad pharmacist, okay? Teachers will look at some teachers and be like, that's a bad teacher, okay? Cops never do that. And because of that, it's created a huge mistrust with the public. And then then you saw people, then the thing that got me the more were people trying to justify the killing of Philando Castile. That one was ridiculous. The guy said, I have a weapon, but I'm about to give you my driver's license. He wasn't armed at the moment. He said he had, the right to conceal carry. Then he gets shot 5 times. And then his girlfriend, people are wondering, why wasn't she calling 911? The police were
She was
already
shot.
there. 911 was already there.
That's true.
So what is she going to do when she calls 911 again? They're already at the scene. Not only that, the police officer said, if you watch the video, don't move. The man moved, and then he got shot 5 times. And then the officer's yelling after he killed the dude, I told him not to move, I told him not to move. So here's an issue. A lot of these cops are afraid of people of color. And if you're afraid of people of color, you should not be working in their communities, period. It doesn't make any sense. Why are you working in these communities if you're afraid of these people? You shouldn't even take this job. This is a job with grave responsibilities. So, for me personally, man, some of these cop murders have just been like ridiculous. Because it's like you can't, in my opinion, I just find it so crazy how people just want to justify certain things. Like, as a human being, there's no way you can, like, in my opinion, if you're rational, to justify this. It makes no sense. Like, the Philando Castile, like, he did not deserve to be shot. Then, when the woman was recording herself, and what gets me now is that there's video of this, and then people still want to try to poke holes in the video. How? We saw it. All of us, we literally saw it. Like, this is not, like, up for debate. Like, we literally saw what went down. And so, like, to me, it's just, like, it just really begs the question, like, why does it seem that people value the lives? Like, I really feel this, and this is true. People value the lives of animals over the lives of black people. I'll never forget it. When I was in middle school, there was a rally downtown Baltimore for people. It was either middle school or high school. There was a rally in downtown Baltimore for people with pit bulls. And they were protesting because the city was trying to put regulations on certain pit bulls because a pit bull or a certain type of dog had attacked a civilian.
Yeah, I think it was 08. I think it was like 2008, if I remember correctly. So like 10th grade.
Yeah.
Something like that, 9th, 10th grade.
Yeah. So they had a rally downtown for dogs. And the thing about Michael Vick's situation, he didn't even fight the dogs. It was his friends that fought the dogs. He knew about it, but he got the biggest sentence because the rest of the people that were mooching off him all those years, they basically snitched on him. So he spent 2 years in federal prison. You have people still protesting this man to this day to not play in the NFL. But then a cop shoots an innocent civilian, doesn't follow protocol at all. And then you people want to say blue lives matter. What sense does that make? So here's my question, because you can't even, like, in my opinion, you can't even deny it anymore. They value the lives of animals over the life of a black man. Why? And why, if so, like, I don't even know, like, how to even word it. Like, how do you value the life of, like, an animal over another human being?
You remember when that they killed that lion, Cecil or whatever?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was like all over the news, and like people were like sending in gifts and tributes to him, and like all the late night talk show hosts were like Jimmy Kimmel was like tearing up over this lion. And like, yeah, like I get it, like it's an emotional thing, like it was messed up. But like I've never seen a like big name like late night host like Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon or what's the other dude? Stephen Colbert. Like none of those dudes like tearing up over an Oscar Grant or a Trayvon Martin, or like you just don't see the same response for like a Cecil Lion for like a Trayvon Martin, you know, like
At all.
that's what baffles me.
What solutions do you guys come up with? Like, I have a few that I thought about. I think that there should be accountability for cameras. For example, if it falls off or anything, you should definitely be held accountable for that. It's like, if you're a physician and you're doing surgery, of course you have to keep track of all of your instruments, and you have to keep documentation of what side of the body you did things on and which organs and bones and things got tampered with. So I think you should definitely have accountability as far as technology. I think that if they had random policing done by the federal government to go into different neighborhoods dressed as the citizens in those neighborhoods and using whatever minorities are commonly found in those neighborhoods, then you can definitely get a gauge of which police are doing what, and whether stereotype or any other factor can play a role into that. Another one is, I feel like, if you look at each of these recorded cases, the police always usually end up throwing the person's cell phone down or destroying it or something.
Yeah.
We should have a certain amount of protection for that.
Isn't that
It is
okay to
technically,
legally?
yeah,
You
but
can
I-
legally film them, right?
Yeah, but I feel like that you should, if someone, tampers with it, it's kind of like tampering with evidence.
Yep.
So there should be there should definitely be more weight to that.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it should be like a fear almost to, hinder that process.
Yeah.
And the last one I said is just in general, if you have any ideas, just write your local representative, vote, know who stands for what, and contact them if you have any ideas as well. And you guys feel free to.
My favorite one, that's something that I always think about, and this is just from past experiences with my father formerly being in law enforcement in his native country. You have the idea of living where you police, because you can't actively say you're a part of the community and come in to protect the community if you yourself are not a physical member of that community. Like, I can't believe that an officer who enters my neighborhood is coming with the best interests of my neighborhood at hand if I don't see him at the neighborhood picnic, or I don't see him walking his dog around the corner. And I mean, there's even this Instagram page. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he he goes around and he harasses the police. But one of the videos that I've seen, he actually asked the officer, is he from Baltimore County? The officer said no. He said, are you from Baltimore City? No. And he starts rattling off other counties in the state of Maryland, and the officer repeatedly answers, no, I don't think I know the video like cuts off before he gives them an answer in terms of if he is from Baltimore, if he's from Pennsylvania, something like that. But the guy brought up a good point. He said, if you aren't from any of these areas, how can you come to these areas and police me? Because you don't know what's going on in any of these communities. Like, how are you supposed to know that the guy Joe that lives around the corner, if he's off on his medication, he's gonna come outside in the front yard and like fill his front yard up like a pool and waddle around in the water. And that's just from past experience. Someone in my neighborhood used to do that, and it was just not that it was a normal sight, but it was something that we knew not to call the police on because we knew the person. It was just the way that they had their psychiatric episodes. And when you live in the community, you're able to identify those different groups. You're able to identify who these individuals are, and you can no longer just view them as just that person over there. You have a name. You have connections to the family. You have a face. In some instances, your kids might play with their kids, that kind of thing. It builds a trust because now you know that this person isn't just invested in their job. They're invested in who I am and the benefit to my family. So, I mean, if you want to talk about having, white officers in a particular area, black officers in a particular area, Asian officers, Hispanic, Latino officers, however you want to do it, they should be required to live in those areas. And then there also should be something kind of what I think similar to what goes on in terms of military, in the sense that when when you're active duty in the military, right, they give you leave where you come home and you get away from that high stress environment, that war environment for weeks, months, whatever the case may be. There should be something like that going on with police officers because, to be honest, some of the areas these police officers are patrolling aren't the best of areas. There's definitely violence, there's drugs, there's all these other things. But always being surrounded in those environments keeps you on edge, right? And then that just furthers the distrust. Maybe you should, take Bob, who's been out in such and such area for the past 2 years, go sit him on a desk and have him sit on the desk for 6 months and just push paper. He need to get away from whatever's going on out there in the street so he can clear his mind and sort of refocus. Or you take Jan, and then you take Jan that was sitting at the desk and you go put her out there. They all have the same training and they all know the respective area that they go into, but they're not constantly indulging in whatever it is that's going on in the community in that regard.
Very good point.
Yeah, those are good. Anyone else have any possible solutions or wants to offer?
Yeah, for this whole issue, shit. It's complicated, man, because in order for there to be like a major solution, there has to be like culpability. And the issue is that a lot of these police officers and a lot of Caucasian people in general just aren't taking any like responsibility or culpability for their actions, and that's the major issue. One cannot change if they do not believe what they're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for that to happen, I think in order for there to be like major change, there needs to be like stricter penalties. You know, people like these cops kill an officer, right, and then they get on paid leave. Darren Wilson was on paid leave. Then he resigned. And then the thing that sickens me the most with Darren Wilson was all of these people that like
Donated to him.
to his account. I'm just and that just sickened me because it's just like you people paid money for this man. Here's the thing that gets me the more. People in the United States, okay, people in general can be very stingy. You see a person on the street homeless, right?
You don't give them a nickel.
Exactly. You don't know their situation. You don't know how they became homeless. People always assume that people that were homeless or that are homeless, oh, they must be drug addicts. That's not always the case. A lot of those people that are homeless are war veterans that can't find work. Mm-hmm. And you guys refuse to even give them a penny. That you will pay your own hard-earned money to this guy who killed somebody because you felt like he was done wrong. Like, he was done wrong for killing someone, taking that son away from their family, then lying about and switching up his story about what happened, because his story switched up a lot. If you look at the interview he did on TV, it's different. Exactly, it's different from some of the stuff that was written down in the case. So how are you guys gonna give money to this guy? Then you're saying the family doesn't deserve any money or even help for the funeral. It's like, are you serious? And the stuff that gets me is just the hypocrisy of it all. Because with Mike Brown, they were like, oh, he shouldn't have stolen from the store. In all my years alive, the main people that I've seen shoplift are white people. And the thing that gets me is that like the main people that I've seen shoplift are white people from suburbia that do it because they're bored, because they want a thrill. Okay. And another thing is that like especially like we're even going to talk about culture here. Amongst black people, you don't generally see black parents buy their kids alcohol so they can take it with them to college. There are many students in my dorms that had parents that would give them weed, that would give them weed brownies, that would give them alcohol and all this stuff. Because the parents are like, hey, we partied in college, so our kids should be able to do the same thing. So that's where the double standard comes in. Because if a white person is found with weed and all these other drugs on campus, they're going to be treated more leniently than a black person. Like, it's crazy. Like, you hear stories, like, I've had white people tell me stories, like, a cop saw, like, weed, and this is before, like, weed started getting delegalized all across the country. Cops smelled weed in the car, saw weed in the car, let them go away, just throw it outside and just go on amongst your way. But then you have black people that are caught with, like, certain drugs, and then they're thrown into jail, like, immediately. Black people are sentenced longer for the same crimes. This is all statistics. They're sentenced longer for the same crimes, the same offenses. They're often arrested more for these minor offenses more than like white people are. It's crazy. So it's like, in order for like certain change to happen, there has to be stricter penalties. There really needs to be stricter penalties against police officers. They need to be held more accountable for their jobs. I feel one thing that could help that, this may sound crazy, and it does, is that some police officers, they're frustrated because they don't feel like they get paid well enough for the type of job they do, and it's a very stressful job, right? So the reason why they're not paid enough is basically because of like, it's kind of like, for example, doctors get paid more than, let's say, a custodian because of the amount of school they did. Okay, to be a police officer, you don't necessarily have to do a certain amount of schooling. But I think certain things that need to be done is, one, they need to do more like tests to see if any of these upcoming officers suffer from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. They need to maybe pay them a little more so they don't feel like they're so on edge, because if they're paid more and they feel like, they're better compensated for the work that they do because it's a tough job, then maybe they won't always be like so, prickish. Because like a lot of people, like, it's not even just black people, it's like there are a lot of white people that don't like the police either. Like, not liking the police is like a pretty like standard thing in like today's society. So I think you gotta do that. Stricter penalties on police, maybe pay them better, do more testing of upcoming officers. Your idea of police officers living in the area, that's a very good idea because those people will understand the environment way better than someone that doesn't come from the environment and just views everyone a certain way. So I feel like it's a combination of all of that.
Yeah, there's a police in California. There's an officer from the neighborhood. I don't remember which neighborhood it was, but he pretty much went back to the community because he knows it and has helped a lot of homeless people get off the street.
Yeah, when you guys talk about that, not to cut you off, but I know an officer, and that's the case with that respective officer. They now serve in the neighborhood that the officer grew up in. So in terms of the people that they interact with on the day-to-day, they're interacting with the guys they went to high school with, middle school with. They're interacting with the parents that they used to knock on the doors when they came to trick-or-treating. So when they go out there, they already understand and know they're expected to see certain groups of people. They know these respective groups are going to be out doing X, Y, and Z. And as long as that X, Y, and Z isn't a criminal offense, you just leave them alone. You let them go on about their business just like they leave you alone and they let you go on about their business. And I believe that person's been an officer for like 10 years or something like that. So definitely been involved in the community and service in their community.
So definitely more compassion
Mhm.
and empathy, you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Switching gears, let's talk about voting. As nonpartisan as possible, there's a huge history behind voting in black people. For example, the 1965 Voting Rights Act is renewed every 25 years. It's kind of backwards to think about a bill or, a law or something having to be renewed that provides rights to people. It should just be automatically unexpiring.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You'll see them rewriting the Constitution every couple of years or looking to George Washington to re-sign it and all those guys.
Precisely. There were historically a fair amount of hindrances to black voting. For example, poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, physical intimidation, land requirements, and other such frivolous things that people can make up to prevent other people from progressing. Do you guys have anything to say about that?
Yeah, when you talk about that, I remember a couple years ago, can't remember the year right now, but it was in Georgia, and I think it was either the governor for a city in Georgia, the governor for Georgia, the mayor for a city in Georgia was saying that they need to eliminate Spanish as a second language at like the DMV, which is one place people can go to get IDs and register to vote. And they were doing that as a way to negate a respective group from voting, that Hispanic Latino group, that Spanish is their primary language. And when you hinder that group from voting, you're silencing that respective group. So it's not just blacks per se that are always being targeted. You're targeting any respective group that sort of goes against whatever you stand for, that goes against whatever your ideal society should be or whatever the case should be. And I just found it kind of weird because, and I'm paraphrasing here and I could just be totally wrong with this, but I remember the quote being something to the effect of like, this is America. When you come to America, you got to learn English. And I mean, if you really want to be technical, that would mean you have to learn the Native American dialects that were actually spoken in North America, not English, because English was a language brought here. And if you also want to be technical, Spanish, even though it was a language brought here from Europe, it's a language that's also spoken in one of the 3 countries that make up North America. That's like saying you can't speak French in North America when French is spoken in Canada. That doesn't really make sense. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel it goes even deeper than that. Like, kind of like, for example, like the whole like what you were saying about Native Americans and like people should speak that and all that stuff. Like when people have the Spanish there, it's not like it's only Spanish. The English is still there. The Spanish is just secondary underneath it. And I feel like, I don't know, you shouldn't really enact that because there's certain parts of the country, like Chinatown, for example. I mean, just all the Chinatowns, so like, let's say Chinatown in San Francisco, right? Like, would you enact those same laws or bills over there to those Chinese Americans? I don't think you would, you know? So, and then, I don't know, it goes deeper, like, kind of like the whole idea of, like, being American is kind of like being white. Like the connection of whiteness with, like, being American. Now, follow me when I say this. Like, for example, there are numerous 4th and 5th generation Asian Americans in California, right? 4th or 5th generation Asian Americans that are going to be viewed less American than, let's say, a person whose grandparents were Russian immigrants. That person who had grandparents were Russian immigrants will be viewed more American than that 4th or 5th generation Asian American. That even happened in a video, okay? Because if someone sees someone of, like, a different skin color or a different ethnicity, for example, Julian's Hispanic, he's an American citizen. Someone looks at him like, oh, where are you from? He may be like, oh, I'm from Baltimore. But then they'll keep asking, probing more, like, no, where are you from? And then you'll be like, oh, I'm from Mexico. Right. Then it's the same thing with, like, Asian Americans. You ask them, like, where are you from? Oh, I'm from California. They'll be like, no, where are you from? Oh, I have family members that came from China in the 1860s. Now, if you reverse that question back to the white person, you ask the white person, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Florida. Okay, but they're like, no, what's your ancestry? They're like, I'm American. No, but, like, the only real Americans are Native Americans. Okay, Native Americans, and then, like, the subset of, the Native Alaskans up in Alaska. Where are you from? And then the whole, like, connotation changes. The white person looks at you like, what's wrong with you? Why are you asking me this? You're just like, I'm just American. Like, no, you must have came from somewhere. Like, America was uninhabited until the Native Americans came here. Also, but let's not even talk about, the possibility of the Aborigines being darker or black before the Native Americans came here via the ice bridge from Siberia with the whole, Olmec culture in, Mexico. Let's not talk about that because that would even, like, scramble more people's minds. But you ask them that question and they won't say, oh, I'm Polish, or I'm French. They'll just be like, oh, I'm American. What got me was last year, it was in Charleston, South Carolina, right, with the whole Confederate flag debate. In Charleston, South Carolina last year, there was a video of this one white dude who was supporting the Confederate flag, and of course a black man that was saying, take it down. Now, when people say that the Confederate flag was not based on racism, that's a lie.